The fact is that when I composed the structures before, I was totally responsible for that because I wanted the anonymity of the composer. The composer was just a transmitter and nothing else. But I mean, very early I was aware of the fact that this was totally impossible. It is possible in some cases, only some extreme cases, but not always. You cannot base a composition on that. But I did not want to go back to 12-tone system because I found the 12-tone system impossible as restraining the possibilities you had. So therefore I began to develop a system where the freedom was possible. And I conquered my own freedom, not only on the 12-tone system, but also on the possibility of composing purely with a system, generally speaking. And therefore the Marteau, I think, even if I remember that 50 years later, was a kind of beginning for me of reconquest of freedom. Yes, I agree with this point of view that I tried to join two parts of the musical world which were before incompatible. And even looking at each other with a kind of distance. I don't think that Schoenberg was very, very, not friendly, but I mean, agreed with the point of view of Debussy, which he found certainly too free, as a matter of fact. And I don't think also that neither Weber nor Berg, even Berg, were really very admirative of Debussy. They thought too free, also too not enough constructive. And I suppose that for me, also on the contrary, the constructivism of the three Viennese from time to time was a little bit of a burden. And I thought that in Debussy the inventivity and the ingenuity and the spontaneity of Debussy were very necessary sometimes. You cannot really just be constructive all the time. You have to be descriptive also. And I suppose that's the kind of junction between constructivity and spontaneity, which for me was very important. Yes, between the spontaneity from one part and the constructivity on the second part, I think also there is a balance to establish. And I was attracted by both sides. I must say, sometimes, of course, the music of Debussy is very light. One cannot deny that. Sometimes, I say. But in the main work, certainly not. It is as deep as possible. And the constructivism of the Viennese school can be also seen sometimes like a burden. And therefore you have to look at this constructivism in a kind of way of being free also from it. And I suppose that's the liaison between constructivism on one part and spontaneity on the other part is for me the two lungs of a musician. Well, I was very interested in this at this time by the other cultures not of our world, but the sound of other cultures, simply that. And I heard quite a lot of music, non-European music, Bali music, African music, Japanese traditional music, Chinese theater, and so on and so forth. And therefore, I was very interested in this sound, and I think a civilization has a sound for itself. Look, Bali, the kind of metal sonority they have is typical, and it goes for their music. The music is expressed not only by the pitches, but by the way the pitches are transmitted, and that's metal. If you go to Africa, for instance, the wood is one of the main transmission of sound. And then, the sound is not only the pitch also, but the sound of the wood, and so on and so forth. Therefore, for me, to stay in the tradition of the Viennese school and the European school was too much. And I wanted to have another world. And I am very sensitive generally to the sound. I think sound should be a very important part of the music, and not only something you add superficially afterwards. So therefore, you can find in my work, for instance, in the Mallarmé improvisations, you can see a different sound also until the next one, the last ones, like sur Incise, which is typical of a sound which is not existing. You have forefathers, let's say. Stravinsky, Lenos, for instance, is the forefather of the sound of sur Incise. But when I had the percussion, very important, and the harps, then the sound is totally different. And that's a sound which is a little bit from the Balinese side, from the African side, but not at all of the European side. And that for me is very important, that we absorb other cultures not only by their content, but also by the way they are transmitted through the sound. Yes, certainly it was a period where, the doubt of a period was finished. So without doubt, you finish. And with doubt, you have a tendency always never to finish. And that's, what indicates for me. There are some works I never touched again. But there are some works which are unfinished, not because I gave up, but because the reflection on the content of the work, on the structure of the work, was not, very clear to me. And therefore, I returned to the works, but there are some works also which I don't touch again. For instance, Dérive 2, I will not touch it again. That's finished, because I worked on it for quite a lot of years. And then, I discovered a kind of way of structuring, of composing the work, which is totally different of what I have done until now, a kind of narrative aspect of the work. And then this narration is finished, and I cannot add. The addition would be totally artificial. And other works I want to finish, and some other works I don't want to finish. That, I have a relationship with my work which is very sentimental, yes, certainly. I would like to finish Éclat multiple, especially. That's one of the works which is almost finished, and I have practically twice the length of the work as I play it now, and therefore I would like to finish, because I have the concept of the end is already there. Therefore, for instance, also the concept of the end of Dérive 2 was already 15 years ago there already, but it was too soon. So I composed it, and knowing that I will compose in between long development, and then when I had this development behind me, well, I jumped to the end, certainly, because the end was there already. And sometimes you think of the end long before the rest of the piece, and therefore, I keep it in reserve. Although they come from the same material, but they are totally different, because first also Dérive 1 was improvised practically. I had, Sir William Gluck, who was the chief of the music in the BBC when he engaged me for the BBC, and he was also in a festival, at the head of a festival, and that was the end of his engagement for this festival. And the musicians, and they know that I was very close to him, wanted an homage. That was also a short piece, at the last moment. And I remember I was in Los Angeles having a series of concerts, and I was working in between the rehearsals to send the score at the last minute. And I think, in another Dérive, certainly I will use the scheme of Dérive 1, but more complex. I have a Dérive 3 in my head already, and I hope I have the time to finish it. Definitely. I think if you have an interesting relationship and a productive relationship with material, certainly the material composed for you. But you must know how it is composed. And that's for me, I find this wonderfully wonderful word for that. But as a matter of fact, the material composed with you and you compose with the material. That's an exchange. Because for me, I consider that under the point of view of deduction. You have a material. What do you do with that? That's not only the spontaneity, which is important, but what do you do with this spontaneity? And you invent a hyper-spontaneity. That's the difficulty of composing. So if you look, for instance, which are sort of derived pieces, if you see my notation, number 2, for instance, if you compare the length of the original piece and the final approach, that's 10 times longer, and the material is exposed much more forcefully than it was in the piano small piece. And therefore, when you are confronted, especially I like this experience of being confronted with material you invented 60 years ago. And you say, yes, I recognize this material, I have composed it, that's my material, but I have done nothing with it at this time. What can I do now? And that's, I suppose, that the question that Wagner asked himself also when he was composing the Götterdämmerung. What can I do with this material I invented for Rheingold? 20 years difference. And you can see that was very striking to me when I was conducting the Ring in Bayreuth, to see, to conduct from the Ring from beginning to end, and then you finish with Götterdämmerung, and then 2 days later you began again with Rheingold, and you see the immense difference between both pieces. I've not forgotten, that comes spontaneous back. I remembered them. I remember that I composed them. That's for sure. You never forget completely these things like that. But I did not remember the text, really. And when I saw the text, I say, oh, that's interesting. And therefore, generally, all the other pieces of mine, the earlier, I did not want that to be considered as, my works. But this one, yes, because I say that's very simple, that's naive, but that's a process I would not consider as uninteresting. I find these ideas interesting, and I want to magnify them.
But is it true they were somehow lost and someone found it?
They were. The manuscript was lost. The manuscript and is lost again. The manuscript. I had, as a co-student, a composer named Serge Nig. And I did not see him for a long time. And when I came back from the States after my staying there in New York for 6 years, then I received a letter from him that the radio wanted to organize a broadcast on the early students of Messiaen, and with the piece they were performing they were composing at this time. And he asked me, "Are you allowing that?" I say, yes, but I have not the manuscript. If you can send me the manuscript, or photocopy of the manuscript, I would say yes or no. And then he sent me a photocopy of the manuscript. And I say, yes, you can. As a student of Messiaen at this time, it was perfectly justified to take that as an example. And after he told me, or I learned, I don't remember so what source, that the manuscript got lost again after when I sent it. I did not have to send it back even because I did not see the manuscript. I saw only the photocopy. And apparently they wanted to put that back in the library of the radio. They could not find again the manuscript. So it's lost and lost. Yes, because that's, with libraries, the academism of this analysis and so on, it was unbearable to me. So, and in a funny way, unbearable after Messiaen. Messiaen, well, I did not agree with all what he was doing, but at least he was inventive. And he had his own world. But Leibowitz, that was just, kind of salt on nothing. That was so dry and so unimaginative. And that was only 1 to 12, 12 to 1, 6 to 1, 1 to 7, and so on. It was really dreadful. And I say, well, I will do it myself also. And so I did, I did 12 pieces of 12 bars, and each piece is beginning with the next, with 1, with 2, with 3, with 4, and so on. I say, now that's my system, but it does not sound like that, simply that. And but the pieces were not fun. That was just spontaneous pieces, certainly, because I composed them within 2 days or 3 days. I don't remember exactly. Yes, just before Christmas, 45. Yes, because it's strongly organized, but it's free. And all the works I do, which I don't look for that. But if there is an accident, something which makes me go another way, which I did not foresee, then I like it, and I just go this byway. Let's say. Because I think that's the Mahler word correspond. The material composes you, and you have to react to what the material proposed to you, and you have not seen before. And therefore, this kind of, as I said before, this kind of exchange between the material and you is very important. And then, the notation were important in this case. Yes. Exactly that. And I like this superimposition. That's like archaeologists which discover civilization down, and down. And then you discover yourself progressively, like archaeologists discover an old civilization.